Welcome back from that short break. We continue with New Vision TV News, and now we look at what's making headlines in business with Lynn Komjishe.
You're in time for In Business here at New Vision TV. My name is Lynn Komjishe. With me is Paul Bushalizi, and we continue to look at the budget analysis from 1986 up until last year. So we realized that 1987-1988 budget falls from 1.1 of 1986-1987 to 53.2 billion. That was trillion of shillings.
Yes.
Now we're in a billion. What happened?
Well, I think what happened, what happened was this budget, just as this budget was being done, or shortly before this budget was being done,
Okay.
they had a currency reform. And the currency reform involved removing two zeros from the currency at the time. So if you had a budget of 1.1 trillion the year before, it should be about 10 billion in this year that we're talking about.
You
so
know,
that's why the figures shifted so dramatically.
If you could shed more light on these currency reforms, I don't get it.
So I think the government wanted to achieve two things. Off the top of my head, I think government wanted to achieve two things. One, it wanted to generate revenue, taxes. How it did this was that it removed the two zeros, and then it said any liquid holdings, meaning any cash holdings, anybody holding cash in the banks or wherever, we shall tax that cash 30%. So government at once got 30% from all the monies people had. If you had, let's just, so two zeros, if you had 1,000 shillings in your pocket at the time, it became 10 shillings, and government removed 3 shillings, so they give you 7 shillings.
It still doesn't make sense.
Why not?
So you remove it, okay, I remain with 10, you take the other.
Then I tax you. It was essentially a tax of 30% on your cash.
Why were they confusing people?
No, they needed revenue. They needed revenue.
Okay.
They remember they were coming out of a war and all that kind of business. Government, the country was really broke. They needed revenue urgently.
All right.
That was one thing they wanted to achieve. Second thing they wanted to achieve was, if you reduce the number of zeros, then you can reduce the rate of growth of prices in a mechanical way. So, for example, if you have 1,000 shillings, as we said, and inflation is 30%, the thing will rise to 1,300 in whatever time period, isn't it? But if you remove the two zeros and you have 10, whereas the inflation will still raise it by 3, but it provides some comfort. Somebody is less likely to double his prices if he sees that. It's a psychological thing.
Indeed, that's why it's confusing me.
Yeah.
But we noticed that the minister also changed at that time. Then we had Minister Professor Ponciano Mulema. Now we had Dr. Crispus Chionga came in, and defense took the biggest share then.
Yeah, at the time, of course, what had happened is that when the NRA came into power, it swept out the old army.
Yes.
And a lot of this old army fled northwards. And after a while, after some time, they regrouped and tried to fight back, so to speak. Or as the army was trying to move, and it was an ugly time, but as the army was trying to pacify the northern area, ensued a civil war.
Yes.
And so immediately, war can't wait for other things. You have to pay for it. So imagine at the time the minister was saying, I think even it was almost about half of the budget went to the army that year.
Yes.
Crazy.
Did it help at all?
Well, there is no war in northern Uganda today, so we can say that it was the beginnings of the end of the civil war in northern Uganda. You have to remember that when the NRA came to power, it was really an infantry force, just people walking with AK-47s. Now, to combat the army in the north, you want to increase your firepower, so the cost of new cars and all that kind of business went into the budget.
So what happened with the biggest chunk going to defense? then how did they manage? How did the country manage?
Well, I think first of all, if you notice that the budget rose 5 times.
Yes.
So the previous year it was 10 billion, you know, okay, 1 trillion, but becomes 10 billion.
10 billion.
And now they are talking of a budget of 53 billion. So in the previous year, so you can see 5 times it's gone up. So even if the budget, even if the army took half of that, which is, let's just say 26 billion, that is twice the budget of the previous year. Oh, yeah. So a lot of stuff could still go on, in theory, because whatever else was sharing twice the budget of the previous year. So things went on anyway, the best way they could at the time. And in fact, in that year, the minister announced that he was going to pay 50% of the cost of primary school kids, all primary school kids, and 75 and 65% of boarding fees for kids in boarding school.
Then they had the money.
Well, you see, they've doubled. You see, they moved it from 10 billion to 50 billion. So 5 times, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
But half of it has gone to the army, which is 25 billion. But there's still 25 billion left, which is twice last year's budget. So the money was, in theory, still there.
In theory, as
yes, in theory.
And we also note that there was a slash wave abolishing duties on a raft of essential commodities.
Yeah.
What were they trying to achieve?
Well, I imagine politics. When you've taken over government, you want to make sure people are comfortable. So you abolish taxes on soap, sugar, salt, and paraffin as a way to spur their supply. People would probably import them because there was not much local production. So it's probably just a political thing that let's just slash this so people can be comfortable. They don't be too happy, too unhappy with us. After all, we're fighting a war in the north. We don't need people down in the south
suffering,
being sad with us. Also, you know, they reduced, or I think reduced or scrapped the duties on buses, pickups, minibuses, car tires, and spares, and road construction equipment, which is very important.
If that happened today,
oh, happy days, my friend, happy days, happy days.
Well, you mentioned the wavering of these essential commodities. I'm looking at how did from 1986 to 1988. Was there any economic growth? Was there any progress? Well, could we see any progress there? It would be. I actually don't have it here. I don't know what the economy grew by, but it's suspected when it didn't grow very much, especially since inflation was still high. I think this year it was also about still the same as 240% a year, which is a doubling of prices every 3 months. Crazy. That's interesting. Very interesting. But somehow we'll probably look at how it worked. How did the budget, you know, finally perform at the end of the financial year?
Well, now you'd have to be looking at the 86-87 budget. They had planned a budget of about, as we said, 1.1 trillion, which then should have been about 11 billion. But they ended up only not spending less, about 10 billion. They collected taxes 4.8, yet they had planned to collect about 4.8. So they weren't very ambitious the previous year, I think, with the Mulema.
I mean, they were just
still starting. As we said earlier, in '86 they even were late to the budget. It came in August. They read it in August. But you can see now they're maybe becoming surer, and they can even increase 5-fold the budget.
That's true.
So they become a bit more confident compared to the previous year.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Like I said in our previous show, please do visit our website www.newvision.co.ug for more of these budget speeches, especially from those years, and the analysis that he is doing for Vision Group. Thank you, Paul, for joining us.
You're welcome.